Nabenta na yung auger ring ko. Nice. Let's see. 85 or 85. You know what? I'm gonna pick all of those up. Pick these up in my inventory so I can see. Man, these guys hurt. Is that a guy? Shit. Okay, let's see. Watch a bit while I'm playing. Just close this up.
Hi guys, welcome back to another Hugh Jeffries video. In this video, we're going to
So
be
hard to
tearing
play this
down
game
and
without
assessing the
cartoons.
repairability of the iPhone 13. Last year, the Apple iPhone 12 had a number of software-based locks which prevented third-party repair. It's been a year since the outcry from tens of thousands of people over the iPhone
I ran out
12's
of
software
Agus.
locks, which impacted repairability. So, has Apple changed anything? In order to fully test the repairability of Apple's new phone, I've purchased two iPhone 13 Pros. This will allow me to interchange genuine Apple parts between the two devices. From the outside, these phones look almost identical. In the box, you'll find the same accessories as the 12 series, which of course came with no charger or headphones. It should be noted that the USB-C style power lead won't plug into your older style power adapters with a USB Type-A connection, so you may have to go out and buy a new power adapter anyway. With the blue phone out of the box, it's time to get the gold one out and remove that paper film over the display. Before we take apart these phones, I'll first power them up to make sure they're both fully functional. Navigating into settings, I can pull up the About page. Both of these phones are iPhone 13 Pros running iOS 15.0. In recent years, Apple has put strong emphasis on sustainability. They state they're aiming for carbon neutral products by 2030. They've removed all the plastic wrap from their phones, most of the accessories, and are using some recycled materials in this iPhone. However, something better than recycling is to use something for longer, or fix something you already have instead of replacing it. In the case of these iPhones, I'd expect to be able to replace the screen, battery, and other critical components. The Pro model iPhone 13 features a high refresh rate display. However, it can be capped via software at 60 frames a second. Will replacing the display have an impact on this feature? Other features to keep an eye on are the battery health, True Tone, and Face ID, as these are problematic to repair on the iPhone 12. Proceeding to open our first iPhone 13, I'll place it on a heat plate on the high setting for several minutes. This will evenly heat the front of the phone to soften its adhesive. Using direct heat sources such as a high-powered heat gun can burn the display, leaving marks in it. After unfastening the two Apple-designed pentalobe screws that require a special driver, I can pull up on the display using a suction cup to create a gap for a plastic pick to be inserted. The pick can be worked around the perimeter to loosen the display. At the top section of the phone, there are two clips that will need to be undone before the display will open up to the left-hand side. Here we get our first look inside the iPhone 13 Pro. With one down, there's one to go. I'll repeat the same process for the gold phone. I've seen people pry up these phone screens using thin metal prying tools or even a razor. Not only could this scratch your frame, but also crack or damage the OLED panel. If the suction cup doesn't lift up the display, the phone just isn't hot enough. The adhesive on the iPhone 12 and 13 does put up a real fight, so you'll need to have the proper equipment to open it. With that, our second phone is opened. Firstly, I'm going to be swapping the logic boards between the phones to simulate changing every part inside the phone. This will allow us to see what works and what has been blocked by software. Then we can see what part is actually causing the error and what kind of an impact this will have on the repairability of the device. Starting with the blue iPhone, I'll remove the two brackets which are securing the flex cables for the battery and display. These will need to be unplugged so I can detach the screen from the phone. The internal design on this phone differs from previous models. Apple has printed the name of the processor on the logic board and have slightly changed the design of the battery. Having unplugged the display, it can now be detached from the phone. Moving across to the gold iPhone, we can repeat the same process. One big change is the display's picture and touch cables have been integrated into just one. Removing the display from the gold iPhone 13 Pro, it's now time to get out the logic board. This can be done by removing the SIM tray and the 13 cables connecting to the board. In removing just the display and now the logic board, we've used 4 different types of screws, 2 of which are security screws. After the cables and 2 standoff screws have been removed, the SIM eject pin needs to be moved out of the way. Now the board is free. Carefully maneuvering it out of the phone, we can get a look at it. In a similar design to previous iPhone models, this iPhone board has once again returned to having a soldered-in SIM reader. In the iPhone 12, the reader was modular. I was able to upgrade a single SIM iPhone 12 to support 2 SIM cards, but that won't be possible with this model. Now that we have one logic board out, I'll need to retrieve the other one before we can swap them across. I want to make sure that the symptoms, if any, are the same across the 2 devices. As I'm working, I'm keeping track of all of these parts and components on several magnetic mats. Laying everything out helps me keep track of where things go when it's time to reassemble. It's now time to swap the 2 boards. This process doesn't sound like it would do anything. After all, they're the same model of phone and everything inside looks the same. While the hardware of the phone is identical, the software of most components from the cameras to the vibration motor have their own serial number. If the software were designed in such a way that if those components' serial numbers changed, it could break or limit functions of the device. This is what happened with the iPhone 12. Now that the board is installed, everything else inside the phone is from the other device. Let's see how it reacts. After powering on, there are several messages from the Settings app. Unlocking the phone displays an important camera and display message. Forced to tap Learn More, it says these parts are unable to be verified as genuine Apple components. We also see an unable to activate Face ID message. Tapping Learn More on any of these messages will take you to Apple's website where it recommends you to service your phone at Apple. This is what we saw with the iPhone 12, however the 13 takes it a step further, with even more issues arising, which we'll get into. For those unaware, the battery health has been purposely disabled along with Face ID and True Tone. Digging a little deeper, I tested a variety of functions on the phone, including the cameras. I found that portrait mode and the new cinematic mode don't function correctly when using the selfie camera. Cinematic mode allows you to press record, but the time never increases and no video is saved. In portrait mode, the background does not blur, but you can see it detects my face, but refuses to take an image, saying to move further away. No matter how far I move, it doesn't work. This also tends to lock up the camera app in the process. Before jumping to conclusions, I'll try to replicate these issues on the other iPhone 13. It will have the same setup as the other phone, all genuine new Apple parts, just from a different phone. After everything is connected, we can test the phone. At first, it wouldn't power on. Just like the iPhone 12, after disassembling, it requires the charger to be connected for anything to happen. The phone has the same issues as the other. No battery health, no True Tone, and no Face ID. But what about the cameras? Well, the same issues occur with both portrait and cinematic mode. It should be noted that the rear cameras work just fine. However, the issues don't end there. Auto brightness ceases to function. As you can see, there is no change after switching the lights on or off. Compared against another iPhone, you can see how the phone should be responding. As an attempted fix, I'm going to restore the
shit.
phone using iTunes to iOS
3.
15.0. This may or may not fix these issues, but there's only one way to find out. Trying to set up the phone again, you can see Face ID has not come back into a working state. As for the rest of the issues with the phone, well, they're all still there. In fact, the camera issues have changed slightly. Now the camera has become more unstable. Instead of viewing the image and not being able to capture it, the viewfinder now freezes and only updates every few seconds. This goes for both the cinematic and portrait modes of the phone. At a closer inspection, the phone I erased is on a different build of iOS 15.0. It appears these phones shipped on a pre-release version. I will update the other phone to see if it gets the same
damage.
results.
Fuck.
After updating, we now have two phones that have freezing camera viewfinders. Somehow this update has caused more issues. I have retested the phone and everything else remains the same. Now that we know what issues arise, it's time to find out what actually triggers them. I'll be installing each of the logic boards back into its original frame and testing out a camera and display replacement to see if that causes any of the issues we've just faced. I'll be reattaching the original display for now, so I can test if all of those issues disappear when the factory parts are reinstalled. Upon boot, all of those messages disappear right in front of my eyes, and all of those features are now magically back in place, and everything from the cameras to the auto brightness is working as it should. So that begs the question, what is causing the auto brightness not to work and the front-facing cameras? And what will happen when we do a display replacement? Is that even possible on this phone without losing some kind of functionality? Well, let's find out. Firstly, I want to get to the bottom of these camera issues. So I'm going to replace the front-facing camera on one of these phones. While we're up at this top section, you'll also see Apple's new earpiece design, which runs through the top section of the housing rather than the display. With the camera swapped over, I'm going to reattach that speaker and test out the phone. I'll reinstall the logic board and a display panel back onto the device. Powering back up, we can see as a result of changing the camera, the phone has disabled Face ID. Checking the cameras, they are also glitched out just like before. However, auto brightness is still working. The only thing I would believe would cause it to not work is a display replacement, which is the last thing I'm going to be testing. I'll first reinstall the original front camera to ensure accurate test results. After reinstalling the logic board back into the phone, it's now time to test out a display replacement. This screen has two cables, one for the display and one for some sensors at the top. In previous models, this cable is paired to the phone and replacing it will break Face ID. The first screen I'll be testing is straight from the gold iPhone with its very own sensor cable. We'll see what happens with this. As you can see, we're getting that important display message, which I expected. But how about everything else? Well, in display and brightness, True Tone is missing and Face ID no longer works. For my next test, I'll attach the original display's sensor cable and the other phone's screen cable. This way, I don't have to physically remove the sensor cable, meaning it remains untouched. Reconducting my test in this state, you can see Face ID doesn't work. To ensure this is an accurate result, I'll be swapping the sensor across the two screens and retesting. As these sensors are glued in place, I'll be using the heat plate once again at a lower temperature setting, just so I can soften the adhesive holding that cable in place. After removing both cables, we can interchange them between the two screens. In this configuration, we have a brand new iPhone screen from another phone with the sensor cable from this very phone. In other words, it should work perfectly fine. Despite the genuine display message, Face ID still doesn't work. The only component in this entire phone that is not from the factory is the display panel. The sensor cable remains the same, yet Face ID still doesn't work. If you do it the other way around, where you have the original display panel but a different sensor cable, well, the same thing happens. Face ID this time will actually let you into the menu to set it up, but it will fail after just a few short seconds. As with every issue I've faced in this video, I've tried a factory reset using iTunes just to make sure that doesn't make any difference to the phone. After resetting the device and retesting, I found the exact same results. That means if you damage your display on this new iPhone 13 Pro, you can say goodbye to the functionality of Face ID. But that's not all. With just replacing the display, the selfie camera doesn't work correctly, with portrait and cinematic mode not being able to capture anything. Auto brightness doesn't work, and True Tone has been disabled. Despite all of this, the high refresh rate still works. With that, it's finally time to reassemble our iPhone 13s back with all of their original factory parts, and hopefully they'll still be working by the end of it.
Oh shit, I have no food. No wonder. Never damaged the solar.
I can attach the display, being sure not to damage it, as if I do, a replacement will cause the phone to have limited functionality. Apple is able to pair new components to this phone and avoid all of these issues discussed today. However, this prevents third-party repair shops or a DIY repairer to really be able to repair the phone and still have it work properly. After giving the inside of the phone a good clean, I can close it up and proceed to reassemble the gold iPhone 13. After installing all of the brackets, I can clean down the internals of the phone using a microfiber cloth to remove any of the dust inside. Closing up the phone, I can reinstall the SIM card trays, and finally, the pentalobe screws at the bottom of each device. And with that, we're done. So this is it, the iPhone 13. I believe it has been engineered not to be repaired by any third party. I might have spent $3,400 on these two phones, but I truly don't believe they belong to me. Even something as common as a display replacement will cause other functions of the phone to stop working correctly. I'm disappointed that these software locks I brought to light last year have only gotten worse. I hope to see change in the form of a software update, but only time will tell. Both of these phones are fully functional after being reassembled with their factory parts. And on that note, this has been a
Hey, take it easy. You're gonna kill me. God, why are people not? House, it's you. Where you been? I was beginning to wonder if you were ever gonna show up. Su casa, mi casa, casa.
Why are you here?
When I left Mayfield, I went back to the old neighborhood. You know, you shouldn't leave the bathroom window unlocked.
Yeah, thanks for the safety lesson. Why are you here?
Like I said, when I went back to the neighborhood, I found out immigration was looking for me. So I decided to visit my old buddy's house.
Turn his apartment into a giant prison jumpsuit.
Juan Alvarez is no freeloader. I do my part, earn my keep. The first week, I made you dinner, but you never showed up. The second week, I organized your stuff.
My stuff?
But still, you never showed up. So this week, since I'm a real good painter, I decided to feng shui
Coffee table. Where'd you put it? In the bedroom?
The paint's not cheap, House. It's a custom color.
You sold my table to pay for paint that I don't want.
I had to sell some other things, too.
I started watching this show on Netflix called Love is Blind. Not gonna lie, I'm a fan now. I watched back to back the American version of Love is Blind, and then I watched the Japanese version of Love is Blind.
What's the key differences between the American and
Big key difference, right? Watching the Japanese one is like watching the best fucking romance anime you'll ever see. Because it's so 100% just wholesome shit. The moment the doors open and this guy and girl who has fallen in love with each other's personalities see each other for the first time, and they're just like lights up and they, you know, like awkwardly hug and shit like that. And it's like, oh, now now we're husband and wife. It's so fucking wholesome. The one American episode I watched, clearly this guy just came back from AlphaCon. He fucking walks up and just like grabs the girl's ass and is like, I can't wait to get in that ass. I was like, oh my fucking god. Just that one statement has just completely ruined this build-up.
This is why every romance anime ends when they kiss. This is why they never go further in romance anime.
And then in every American rom-com, they go to the fucking. I started watching this show.
Basically, pretty much.
They think of foreigners. Our community members certainly were, making this our top voted video of the month. If you want to have a say in choosing our next video topic, as well as enjoying exclusive videos and early releases, be sure to sign up at asianboss.io and become a member of our community today. Let's dive in.
昔に比べて最近の東京は外国の方どれくらい見かけますか？
いや、だいぶ見かけますよ。
増えましたか？
増えましたよ。でもこの辺はあまりいないから寂しいよね。
多くなりましたね。浅草とかいろんなとこで会うよね。今ね。
観光地にいっぱいいる感じです。
そう観光地が多いね。
すっごい増えましたよね。5倍10倍ぐらい。で私の小さい頃、小学校の低学年ぐらいの頃は外人さん見かけることもあんまりなかったんですよ。で外人さん見かけたらなんか追いかけててね、わ外人さんだみたいな感じだったんですよ。珍しくて。で私熊本なんですよ。熊本のすごい田舎の方だから、あんまり見かけることもないんで、それこそ1年に1回も見かけないぐらいのだから珍しい感じだったんですけど。今は別にもうね。
外国の人を見かけた時のパッと浮かぶ印象ってどういうものですか？
まあ日本に来る外人っていうのは日本が好きだから来るわけで、そういう点では親日感情っていうの、そういうものを持ってると思いますよ。だから多分外で会ったら私はにこやかにお話しすると思うけど。
私は大好きです。アフリカ系の人も。東南アジア系の人も南アジア系の人も大好きです。
いや、いいイメージです。親切、日本人より。私なんかほら優先席座るときさ、外人の人が助けてくれる。
外国人の出身の国によって何かイメージがあったりしますか？例えばアメリカ人とか東南アジアの人って言われた場合違った印象を持ちますか？
持ちます。アメリカ人の方はなんとなくおおらかな感じ、で東南アジアの方もおおらかだけどちょっとなんとなくそこに日本人とちょっと似通ってるかなと思います。東南アジアの方はねおおらかだけどおおらかさが違うと思う。
東南アジアの人だってね、うちのマンションに奥さんフィリピンの人もいるし、ね別にどうってことないね。
なんかいいイメージ悪いイメージってあったりしないですか？
ないね。
普通に印象を持たないね。みんな同じだね、私の場合は。
いい経験悪い経験ってございますか？
いや私大塚で店やってたんだけど、女の子たちはもう一生懸命やるよね、やっぱしね。中国とか台湾とかの人たちっていうのはね。だからそう別に問題なかったですよ。
雇ってらっしゃったってことですか？
そう。
アメリカの人に対するイメージはどのようなものがありますか？
あまり良くないんですよね。私アメリカ嫌いなんだと思う。っていうのは私8歳の時に終戦なんですよ。昭和20年ね。で8歳の時にでアメリカ人父が事務所を銀座に持ってましたから銀座の方によく行ったんですね。そうするとアメリカ人に会うんですよ。みんな背が高くてこう足なんか長いんですね。で私なんかがこう右に行くのか左に行くのかどっちかって8歳の子供ですからうろうろしてたらば私のかぶってた帽子をパーッとこう下に下ろして私をめくらにさしたんですよ。そういう恨みがありますね。子供の印象っていうのはやっぱり嫌なことが一つあるとその国全体を嫌になるっていうか、だからアメリカ人の中にももちろんいい方と悪い方と黒人の中にもいい方と悪い方がいらっしゃると思うんですけれども、やはり一人一人みんな違いますからね。
お子様がもし外国人の結婚 方と結婚されるとしたら別にそれは認められる。
そうです。自分の好きな人と結婚すれば、それは外国人だからとか日本人だからとかそういう区別はないです。
いや日本人が少なくなってんだから日本人と結婚してさ、日本のその人口を増やすっていうか、そういうあれもいいんじゃないですか。だって愛してるんだからいいじゃないですか。ね。だけど別れるとか切れるとかね、そういうことはやってほしくない。最後まで付き合ってほしい。
帰って嬉しいですね。
それはなぜそう感じますか？なぜ嬉しいと感じますか？
やっぱりさ、いろんなほら血が混じると優秀な子ができるって言いますからね。血が混じるとね、そういうことを聞きますからね。
いいですよ別に、
反対はされない？
反対はしない。
それはなぜですか？
ただね、韓国の人と結婚した人がいるの、友達ね、それはやっぱ良くない。
他の国の人とかだったらどうかも。
OK だよ。みんな OK。
まだ私も偏見があるのでねちょっと皆さん方に申し訳ないかもしれないんですけど、やはり欧米の方とかそういう方々は日本との価値観レベルがねあまり変わらないと思うので、そういう人たちと例えばうちの、孫がですね結婚したいっていうんであれば決して反対はしないと思いますね。ただやはりちょっと後進国だとかあるいは、生活のレベルあるいは価値観の違う方で結婚したいとなるとちょっと待った方が良くないのっていうようにアドバイスしちゃうかもしれません。
私だって娘は外国人と結婚して、で子供3歳の時にシングルマザーになっちゃったから、で孫はハーフじゃない、この前去年の秋日本来たけどすごい子で。
It doesn't ruin.
Window for this refund, given a year after waiting, and hidden in this wall of text is the most shocking part, which is that he's not releasing the CryptoZoo game at all, which I know we all kind of knew that, but is actually insane, because that's the thing. To be clear, he's sold millions of dollars of NFTs for and tens of millions of dollars of in-game CryptoZoo tokens for. I knew he wasn't going to make it, right? We all get that. But I watched for 3 years as Logan's fans, and that's what these investors were. They were fans of Logan Paul. They spent 3 years begging this guy to make this game. And the entire time, he told them he was working on it. And I thought, even at my most pessimistic, that Logan would at least crap out some abomination that he described as a game that limped past our lowest collective expectations. But I was wrong. I mean, I wasn't wrong the first time he said I was wrong when he said he was going to still finish the game. I was wrong that he was going to do it at all.
But even after 12 months of work, you've still managed to overlook one crucial piece of information. See, even though I've said it's coming so many times, you've assumed that CryptoZoo isn't being made. Who are you to decide when the development timeline ends? Trust me, CryptoZoo is coming. I will make damn sure of it.
Oops, so much for making damn sure of it, because there's no game. This is what makes this such a massive con. This guy sold millions in NFTs, tens of millions of Zoo tokens, and he's not even going to release the thing he promised this whole time. This is why it's such a slap in the face. These investors spent 3 years waiting for a game. Not only that, 2 years waiting for an update, which he never gave, and then a year suing him. And after all of that, all he offers is a 12% refund, no game, 30 days to accept. So look, Logan's already taking heat for making good on a promise that he made a year late, but that's not even true. He's not making good on this promise because it's not the same promise. Last year, what he promised was no strings attached buyback and you get a game. This year, it's please drop your lawsuit and you don't get a game, which is incredible to me that there are influencers out there like KSI parading this around like a win for Logan Paul, like he's some sort of hero for offering a year late, half-baked settlement offer. KSI says, what will the haters say now? I don't know. How about where's the game? Where's the art? Where's the millions invested? Where's the motivation for this tweet? Oh, wait. KSI is a co-founder with Logan and Prime. So, of course, that makes KSI Logan's new biggest fan. But seeing as how Logan treats his biggest fans, don't say I didn't warn you. So that's part one, the refund. Now part two is the Zoo tokens. Remember, there were two parts to CryptoZoo, the Zoo tokens and egg NFTs. Now, the tokens were the vast amount of damages that were actually caused, while the NFT sales were much lower. Logan conveniently wants to refund this much smaller part of his game, the NFTs, while pretending that these Zoo tokens were never a real part. They were just gambling. Now, this was sort of less bad when the game was still going to come out because, you know, it made some sense. Maybe you'd still have these tokens, but now it makes no sense at all. From Logan's statement, this buyback is a way for me to make whole those who intended to play CryptoZoo. The buyback is not intended to compensate those who gambled on the crypto market and lost. So he's describing people who bought his in-game currency as gamblers. But that's confusing because the whole point of these Zoo tokens was to buy the egg NFTs and play the game. That's literally how it worked according to him. So instead, he calls people gamblers, despite also saying, quote, Zoo token was created to support the CryptoZoo game and its players. It was, quote, not intended to be an investment vehicle. So how can he say that, then turn around and say people who bought this were gambling? If it's not an investment, how can you refund people who intended to play CryptoZoo if you don't refund people who bought the token that was, quote, created to support the CryptoZoo game? You can't. It makes no sense. And this is why I say this isn't even close to a full refund. And now that he's abandoning the game, what we actually have is millions of dollars of in-game currency Logan sold that he won't pay back. Which brings us to the final part of this story, the third part, the lawsuit. After telling all his fans that they were gamblers who lost, Logan has one final surprise. He says, quote, I have filed a lawsuit in federal court in Texas to hold these bad actors accountable, people who ruined CryptoZoo. But what Logan doesn't tell you is that Texas lawsuit is something he's being sued in already. He's a defendant in the lawsuit that he links in his tweet. He's just cross-suing his co-defendants. Like, he's already being sued, and he's just re-suing the same guys who are already being sued? And who are these secret bad actors Logan's going to hold accountable anyways? Turns out it's his employees he hired, Eddie Ibanez and Crypto King, which all of us already knew because I investigated the story a year ago. But imagine my surprise when Logan Paul tries to rewrite my investigation to pretend he did all the work himself and uncovered the real scam of CryptoZoo while simultaneously trying to erase his part in it. He says, and I find this very funny because I spent a year on that story, quote, "This lawsuit is the result of an exhaustive investigation that included the review of the entirety of conversations. You'd be forgiven to think he was quoting my investigation. He's not. He copied it and tried to rewrite it to make himself look good." In this lawsuit, he says things like, "Hey guys, turns out Eddie Ibanez's entire backstory was a fabrication, including the MIT NFL story. Can you believe it?" It's like, yeah, we know. And then he goes, "Yeah, well, you won't believe what I discovered. Crypto King secretly sold tokens." Yeah, we know. Logan just shamelessly rips off my work claim for claim without citing me. I mean, he says things like, Mr. Greenbaum would later admit that he made millions of dollars through his surreptitious sales of Zoo tokens. But where did Logan find that admission? Was it perhaps when he investigated my video? Time and time again, this lawsuit copies my work, but is embarrassed to cite it. So they even have to say things like, based on public reports. What public report? Mr. Ibanez made approximately $1.7 million from selling Zoo tokens. I could swear I've heard that before. And for my calculations, he made about $1.7 million. Now look, I don't usually mind people using my work, but it's kind of a little strange that Logan is simultaneously trying to discredit my work, saying this lawsuit is not based on snippets of conversation taken out of context, a snipe at my investigation, while then stealth quoting it to pretend that they did any real legwork. And look, if you found that shameless, that he tries to steal my work and pass it off as his own investigation, this next part gets even worse. Because Logan's story this whole time has been that it's all other people's fault. You know, it's just bad actors. Everyone but him was bad. He was always well-intentioned. But his timeline contradicts him. According to his investigation, which is actually my investigation, in August and October of 2021, he learns that Jake Greenbaum and Eddie Ibanez are bad news, and he kicks them out of his team. So what does he do after that? He's gotten rid of the bad actors, can't blame them anymore, right? Does he make CryptoZoo? No. For a full year before I made my video, Logan Paul had full control over his project. He admits it in his own lawsuit, and he did nothing. He said nothing. So how does he avoid accountability now? Well, enter the whipping boy Jeff. That's right, manager Jeff is making one last appearance. Logan blames Jeff for screwing up September 2021 through 2022, but you know what he doesn't mention? What he'll never mention? The real reason the project didn't get back on track is not because of Eddie, not because of Crypto King, but because Logan's own team stopped paying developers who are working on rebuilding the game. So those people stopped working on CryptoZoo. And that's when I found it. The game was dead. It had been dead for months. And that's when I made a big stink out of it. Meaning, it was 100% within Logan's power to save this game. I'm not saying nobody else did bad things, but Logan ultimately had over a year to launch it, to make things right, and he didn't. For financial reasons. Not because someone backstabbed him. He just didn't want to spend the money it would take to make things right. And you know what? That is still true now. It is still 100% within Logan Paul's power as a near billionaire with Prime to make things right, fully right, with his fans who he scammed. And if he gave a full refund, we would all celebrate. Me foremost. But will he? Or will he try to dodge responsibility, cheap out, rip his fans off, and avoid accountability? I think it's the latter. So, those are the three main points. You're all caught up. To recap, part one, refunds. They're being used as a bargaining chip to drop a lawsuit, and so he never has to produce this game, which has been promised for 3 years, and he's sold tens of millions of dollars for. Part two is the Zoo tokens. He's pretending they're not for a game that they definitely were for to avoid refunding people, when in fact he admits they were created to support the game. Part three is the lawsuit, where he stole my investigation, tried to pass it off as his own, but just cuts out the part where he did everything wrong, and leaves out the entire year where he was solely in charge of the project. No bad actors. He could have fixed everything, but he didn't, because He's cheap and doesn't want to pay anybody. Anyway, I hope that catches you up with what's been going on, and I hope we as a community can have the nuance and complexity to hold in our minds two things at the same time as true. One, it's always good if victims get any money back, and we should celebrate that. However, number two is that doesn't mean we can't fight for 100% of what they deserve. And Logan Paul is not a hero for doing this or making things right. He's a serial scammer who's offering a minority refund as a last-ditch effort to save his wallet and his reputation.
It was a crime so strange, cold and calculated that it united two nations in shock and despair. And with the suspect soaring to the top of Japan's most wanted list, he would deform his own face to keep his real identity hidden to the world. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to Coffee House Crime. Today we're looking at the case of Tatsuya Ichihashi and his victim, Lindsay Hawker. There are many strange and disturbing details to this case, including a body in a flower pot, plastic surgery to avoid detection, and a wild hunt for a suspect that would take police years across the entire nation of Japan to capture. So pull up a seat, grab a coffee and sit back. This is the case of Tatsuya Ichihashi. Although our story today takes us to Japan, we're starting it in England, in a city called Coventry. Coventry is located deep in the Midlands of England. Known for its medieval cathedral and, sadly, also for its destruction during World War II, Coventry has bounced back in the last few decades to become an engineering powerhouse to the United Kingdom. With easy access to both London and Birmingham, and most of the country less than a 2-hour drive away, it's a well-situated city with a lot to offer to its residents. And one of those residents was Lindsay Hawker. Lindsay was born on December 30th, 1984, to her father Bill and mother Julia Hawker. She was a happy child growing up and had two sisters named Louise and Lisa. She was schooled at King Henry VIII School, and at the end of college she ventured to the University of Leeds to study biology. She met university with academic success too, and in 2006 she achieved a first-class honours grade. Being both very serious about her future career while also being popular among her friends, Lindsay had a lot going for her. She was bright, nurturing, caring, and successful. But she also had an appetite to try something new before pursuing her master's degree, and so in mid-2006, she hatched up a plan. Lindsay decided to take a year out of a busy schedule to do a bit of travelling while she worked. She figured that a year out of education would bring a new perspective to her life. And so in October 2006, she signed up to Nova Teaching School and found herself on a plane to Japan. She had signed up to Nova, Japan's largest private English school, which recruits adults from around the world to teach the language in both Osaka and Tokyo. Nova is considered to be a prestigious assignment, and Lindsay was one of the lucky few who managed to grab a spot. After touching down in Tokyo, Lindsay was finally assigned to Koiwa, a district in the Edogawa ward of Tokyo, and she would quickly find both comfort and excitement in her surroundings. Located only 17 minutes away from Akihabara and 22 minutes away from Asakusa, there's a plethora of sights, activities and fun things to do near Koiwa. Whether you're there for food, parks, shopping, temples, or just a good drink, Tokyo has it all. She had found herself in one of the most interesting cities that the world has to offer, and she was loving it. She decided to move a little further east from Tokyo's centre to a place called Chiba. Here, the rent was cheaper. She also moved in with two other teachers, both of them also working at Nova School, and very quickly, the three would become friends. And soon after, Lindsay's time in Tokyo started to fly by. Although she was loving her time away from home, Lindsay often still thought about home. She had a loving family, a large group of friends, and a boyfriend back in England. And so with that said, the homebird often kept in contact through Facebook, Skype, text, and phone call. It was 6 months into a stay in Tokyo in March 2007 that Lindsay had an awkward encounter. She had finished work for the day and travelled back to Chiba Station before collecting her bike. As she was unlocking her bike, a man approached her from behind. When she turned around, the man greeted her by saying, "You are my English teacher." Lindsay was confused by the situation. She was sure that he was not one of her students. She awkwardly declined to comment, but the man continued following her. She jumped on her bike and began to cycle away, but still the man followed her. She sped up. His walking turned into jogging, and then his jogging into running. And with Chiba's many roads and intersecting walkways, it was almost impossible for Lindsay to escape him. He continued to strike conversation, asking Lindsay where she was from and where she studied. She still tried to shake him off though. She eventually reached her apartment, and this is where she stopped her bike. The man was known as Tatsuya Ichihashi, and he had been running after Lindsay for the entire duration back home. When he finally caught up with her, he had a proposal to make. And despite his strange performance, the offer was simple and innocent enough. Tatsuya asked Lindsay if she would be interested in providing him English lessons. He felt like he needed a little bit of help with the language. They could meet in a cafe, and he would pay her generously by the hour. Lindsay politely refused. Her work schedule was busy enough, and the time she did have off was on her own terms, having fun. Tatsuya was disappointed, but he did seem to accept her answer. It was here though that he asked her one final strange question. He was thirsty after pretty much chasing Lindsay throughout the streets of Chiba. He asked her if she would politely provide him a glass of water in her apartment. Lindsay was hesitant, but reluctantly she did allow him into the apartment. Sure, he was a strange man, and he did make her feel uncomfortable, but she had 2 roommates. This was a good opportunity to indirectly show the man that she did have company at all times, and it was an opportunity for her friends to see his face, should it ever come up again in the future. They entered the apartment together, and it was inside her apartment while having his drink that he made the offer again. It came with a price tag this time. He'd pay Lindsay 3,500 yen or $32 an hour, and the interaction would be strictly business. This was an offer Lindsay couldn't refuse. Although Nova was helping her get by in Tokyo, she could do with some extra cash, and this was easy money. She agreed to his request, deciding to meet him at a coffee shop a few days later. Tatsuya was appreciative, and he thanked Lindsay for the offer. Before he'd leave her apartment though, he wanted to give her one last thing. He whipped out a pen from his back pocket and grabbed some scrap paper, and then he started scribbling something. A few moments later, he handed her the note. It was a sketch he had just drawn. One of Lindsay. And along the sketch was his name and his phone number.
Weird.
Tatsuya Ichihashi was a 28-year-old man from the city of Ichikawa, also located in Chiba
28?
Prefecture.
Fuck, man.
He was born in
glad I
Gifu
didn't end up
Prefecture
like that.
on the 5th of January 1979, and initially grew up there before moving to Chiba.
I mean, the killing part, that is.
He was born into a successful family. His father was a medical doctor at a local hospital in Chiba, while his mother was also a professional dentist. In his younger years, Tatsuya had ambitions to follow his father's footsteps in becoming a medical doctor. But when he failed his exams and was denied in advancing his studies, he settled for a degree from the Department of Horticulture. He graduated from Chiba University in 2005, and although he passed his degree relatively well, Tatsuya did not make effort to find any work. Instead, he lived on an allowance of 100,000 yen or $920 a month from his parents. And this is where we learn a little more about the dark half of Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya had no previous convictions with the law, but he had been the subject of an allegation of prior theft and injury. Allegedly, he had assaulted a woman on the street during a robbery, but the matter had been settled out of court. It is alleged that his father paid the woman off with around 1 million yen or $10,000. He was also described as a loner with an obsession for physical fitness. Tatsuya regularly attended his local gym, and he often cycled over 25 kilometers every day. In addition to this, Tatsuya was known to be a little reclusive, rebellious, and had no intention to find any work. And with only $900 a month to get by, were weekly sessions at $35 an hour really that sustainable? Back to Lindsay's apartment though. After handing her the sketch with his name and his number, Tatsuya thanked Lindsay for her time and the glass of water. He wished her well, until they'd meet a few days later.
Holy shit.
Fast forward several days, and it is now Saturday the 24th of March 2007. Lindsay had contacted Tatsuya a couple days prior, and they'd arranged for their first English lesson in a local coffee shop. CCTV captured the two conversing while in the queue to grab a drink. Lindsay seemed relatively relaxed, but she did make clear steps backwards whenever Tatsuya moved too close. The pair sat and spoke for what is assumed to be a little over an hour, and progress was good. At the end of it though, Tatsuya awkwardly pointed out that he'd forgotten his money. "No worries," he said, "I only live half a mile down the road."